Uganda's main opposition leader, Kizza Besigye, is detained and charged with murder. Academy Award-winning actress Lupita Nyong'o accuses embattled movie producer Harvey Weinstein of sexual harassment. And in our Music Makers segment, the hot sounds of Sierra Leone's LXG Galadu. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gidu. You are in for Vincent Makori, who will join us shortly from Nairobi. This is Africa 54. Tonight we begin in East Africa, where Uganda's main opposition leader, Kizza Besigye, has been charged with murder on Friday. Police blame Besigye for the deaths of two protesters during a rally on Wednesday. The rally was organized to protest moves to extend President Yoweri Museveni's rule. Besigye has contested and lost 4 elections against longtime leader Museveni. The two protesters died when officers fired bullets and tear gas during clashes with the government opponents. Wednesday's clash in Rukungiri near the Rwandan border was one of several violent anti-Museveni protests that have spread across Uganda since the president last week for the first time openly expressed support for proposed legislation aimed at allowing him to stay in power. Incumbent Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta is urging voters to come out and cast their ballots in the country's rerun presidential election on October 26. Addressing Kenyans during the Heroes' Day celebrations in Nairobi Friday, Kenyatta, whose victory in Kenya's August elections was nullified by the Supreme Court on procedural grounds, said the election must not divide the nation, nor push it to the brink. He also warned that disruptions of the vote would not be tolerated and said security forces have been enhanced and deployed to maintain law and order. Opposition leader Raila Odinga held a parallel rally in his hometown of Bondo, where he asked his supporters not to take revenge on innocent people. Odinga has pulled out of the repeat presidential election. Now joining us by phone from Nairobi is Africa 54 managing editor Vincent Makori. Good evening, Vincent. It is a Heroes' Day in Kenya, but the speeches coming from the two political leaders suggest otherwise.
Good evening, Esther. As you have alluded to, indeed, the day of this Veterans Day, politics on the upcoming elections were front and center. In Nairobi, where President Uhuru Kenyatta led the national celebration, he actually briefly honored the contributions and legacy of Kenyan heroes, but he quickly switched to the October 26th, calling on all who consider themselves heroes to go to the polls. In fact, the entire speech, or a big part of the speech, was all about the reason why everybody should go to the polls. They extolled the virtues of the Constitution, which it says require that every citizen who considers himself or herself a hero should participate in an election as a way of supporting democracy in this country. He did, in fact, castigate those who are planning to attend and to participate in the election, but he said it's their right to stay away from the elections, but should not infringe on the rights of those who want to participate. In fact, the Vice President earlier, also in a very short speech, stayed on that the election will take place, and that those who are trying to stop the elections will not.
Well, Vincent, very interesting developments there in Kenya, including the 3 weeks absence of one of the chief executives at the IEBC. Thank you so much, Vincent, for talking to us. Africa 54 managing editor Vincent Makori reporting live from Nairobi. Now, police in Malawi say they have arrested 140 suspected members of vigilante mobs that have targeted people accused of vampirism, clamping down after a wave of attacks killed at least 9 people. The lynch mob attacks began in mid-September in 4 districts in southern Malawi, where belief in witchcraft is widespread. This week, this spread to Blantyre, the country's second largest city, where mobs torched one person and stoned another to death on Wednesday. Malawi Police Inspector General Lexon Kachama told reporters that police were doing everything possible to contain the situation before it spreads to other cities. President Peter Mutharika has also been visiting parts of the country affected by the violence. The United Nations and the U.S. Embassy have blacklisted several districts in Malawi as dangerous zones for staffers and nationals. North Korea's government has relied for decades on illicit trade to fill its coffers, but a new report notes that appears to be a recent rise in Pyongyang's trafficking of illegal wildlife from African nations, including the Democratic Republic of Congo, Angola, Mozambique, and South Africa. Anita Powell has more from Pretoria.
North Korea finds itself increasingly squeezed by U.S. and international sanctions imposed to try to stop the nation's nuclear weapon and ballistic missile programs. The hermit nation has long found creative ways to bring in cash, often through smuggling under the cover of diplomacy. But one source of illicit income hits an especially vulnerable group: Africa's endangered wildlife. Africa's rhino and elephant populations are already at dire levels, motivated by the Asian market's growing demand. In 2015, South Africa expelled a North Korean diplomat arrested in Mozambique with 4.5 kilograms of rhino horn and $100,000 in cash. It was not an isolated incident. More than half of the diplomats arrested for smuggling rhino horn and ivory over the last 3 decades have been North Korean, according to a new report by South African researcher Julian Rademeyer.
I find it very hard to believe that they're operating completely alone, that they are not being sanctioned in some way by the regime, or at least by their superiors. North Korean embassies, by their very nature, are quite strictly controlled. People cannot move very easily and freely.
African nations have been reluctant to challenge their ties with a nation that supported them in their post-independence struggles, and that, because of its trade restrictions, is in a position to offer good deals.
If a country like North Korea comes along and offers a relatively good deal on refined petroleum, for instance, which is one of their main exports to Africa, it's understandable that African governments may not ask a lot of questions about where that petroleum comes from in the face of all these massive pressures on service delivery.
Rademeyer says the laws do exist to stop illegal trade by diplomats, but the will is often absent.
Law enforcement officials are unlikely to want to stop diplomats. Governments don't want to become involved in diplomatic incidents. Governments with close ties to North Korea don't particularly want to inflame tensions. But the Vienna Convention does allow for cases where there is evidence or there is a compelling case to be made that illegal items are being smuggled, to search those bags and take action.
VOA contacted the North Korean embassy here in Pretoria, requesting a response to the allegations made in the report. However, they did not respond to our request for an interview. Anita Powell, VOA News, Pretoria.
U.S. Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis says the U.S. military is investigating the deaths of 4 American soldiers in Niger earlier this month at the hands of Islamic jihadists. The remains of one of the soldiers arrived in his home state of Florida this week. Mattis said the military would release any new information it receives in a timely fashion.
And the loss of our troops is under investigation. We in the Department of Defense like to know what we're talking about before we talk. And so we do not have all the accurate information yet. We will release it as rapidly as we get it because we are very proud of our troops. As you know, we investigate any time we have our troops killed.
Soldiers were killed earlier this month when Islamic State terrorists ambushed U.S. and Nigerian forces during a firefight that also killed 4 of Niger's security personnel. U.S. Senator John McCain, a frequent Trump critic, is threatening to issue a subpoena to get more information about the attack. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Coming up, Oscar-winning actress Lupita Nyong'o speaks out about her experience with sexual harassment. Stay with us.
This is BizBeat. The economic crisis in Greece is now in its 8th year, a small country of 11 million where the unemployment rate is over 22% and where real estate prices have dropped 40% over the past 10 years. But tourism is reaching record levels, and renting flats and apartments through platforms like Airbnb is a booming business. Eleni Toma runs sales and reservations at Athens Residence Apartments. She says it's a chance for me to have a steady job again. Toma's company rents dozens of flats in a converted building. And building permits are down in the country, but Miltos Epithemiadis, CEO of Nova International, says another market is opening. He says the empty and abandoned apartments are now being renovated. But the short-term rental business adds to rising rent prices in a country still suffering from low wages and incomes. For VOA's BizBeat, I'm Philip Alexio.
Now, growing up in Sierra Leone during the brutal civil war left many people with indelible memories. And while not everyone is gifted in depicting their thoughts through art, Richmond Garrick is especially gifted in fine art. He paints on canvas to bring awareness of his homeland to a wider audience. He also teaches fine art, graphic design, and multimedia at Williamstown High School as well as DeVry University in New Jersey. And Richmond Garrick joins me in the studio to tell us more about his work. Professor Garrick, welcome to Africa 54.
It's indeed a wonderful pleasure for me to be here with you, Esther.
You know, I always wonder what comes to mind when somebody starts drawing and depicting images that really tell the story. What happened to you here?
You know, well, actually, I grew up in Sierra Leone, like you mentioned earlier, and I discovered my talent while I was there, but my father detested the idea for me to be an artist, you know, but I was stubborn, and I continued to draw and paint. And I exhibited my work in Sierra Leone before actually leaving, and I left Sierra Leone at the brink of the civil war.
What do you remember drawing first? What came to mind and what really, you know, inspired you? What drove you to get to the pen and just draw something?
It was funny. I wasn't even thinking about becoming an artist when I was young. But I remember around 9, 10 years old, I was looking at a book. It was really a music book with pictures of different composers. I remember Beethoven, Mozart. And I picked up colored pencil and just started drawing. You know, and since that day, I never stopped drawing.
I imagine you being very young, going to school and teachers looking at your work and saying, wow, you can do something. Did that give you motivation to say, hey, this is my element, I'm going to be doing this for a lifetime?
Yes, definitely. Definitely it gave me the motivation, you know, until I got to high school. But apparently, because of the lack of encouragement for the arts, especially in Sierra Leone, which I'm hoping that we would have support and that the art will be given the credence that it deserves. When I got to high school, we didn't have a teacher for art, you know, so it was very difficult. But then a couple of us got together and we were helping each other, you know, with the same interest in art, and we just continued to draw and paint. And then we took the national exam in art.
Let's come back to the U.S. now, because in the early 1990s, you came to the U.S. and voila. This is another world altogether. You get the opportunity, you get all the, you know, people supporting you. Tell us where your artwork took you when you got to the United States.
Well, actually, when I came to the United States, I'd always wanted to have a degree in art because in Sierra Leone, our universities didn't have a degree program for the arts. So when I came, I decided to go back to school and got my associate degree in art and advertising design, then my bachelor's from Montclair State University in fine art and graphic design, then master's at Rutgers, Mason Gross. So after that, I embarked on exhibiting my work at galleries and museums, which have really been lucky, and my work has actually got rave reviews, especially because it's been dealing with issues relating to the civil war in Sierra Leone.
And not only have you done the artwork about Sierra Leone, but you've also depicted some of the powerful images and most powerful people in the world, like Martin Luther King, former president of the United States, Barack Obama. How did that go?
Well, I work predominantly in oils and ballpoint pen. So when my kids were young, they came home with an assignment on the biography of African Americans, and I started reading about these stories about Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and I was really shocked, you know, because I didn't know much about African American history, you know, and I realized that if it wasn't for their struggle, I wouldn't be here. Then I started doing these ballpoint pen drawings, you know, and I just continued as, gratification to the struggle. But fortunately, when I did Barack Obama, former President Barack Obama, a colleague of mine suggested that I should send it to the White House. And then I got a response from him, a thank you card, which I'm hoping that it would be in his presidential library.
Well, Professor, you've really gone places. What's next? And I know you're teaching all this fine art to students and also at the university. What's next for you?
What I'm looking at, especially for Sierra Leone, I would like to see how much I can influence the arts in Sierra Leone and elevate the consciousness for the arts. Because I think it deserves the credence, you understand, and more attention should be paid to the arts. I know we have a museum, but if you have to compare the kind of museum that we have in Sierra Leone relative to a national museum in Nigeria or Ghana, you know, I think there's more that should be done.
And can be extended to the whole of the African continent.
Oh, certainly.
Professor,
certainly.
Thank you so much for your work and your insight into this. Richmond Garrick teaches fine art, graphic design, and multimedia in Williamstown High School and DeVry University in New Jersey. Now, disgraced Hollywood film mogul Harvey Weinstein is now facing criminal inquiries in 3 cities after an Italian actress told Los Angeles detectives he raped her in a hotel room in 2013. The woman and her attorney told the Los Angeles Times that Weinstein bullied his way into her hotel room, refused to leave, and raped her. However, a representative for Weinstein said in a statement that Weinstein unequivocally denies allegations of non-consensual sex. More than 40 women have accused Weinstein, 65, of harassment or abuse, including Lupita Nyong'o, who accused Weinstein of several incidents of harassment in an op-ed piece published by the New York Times on Thursday. She detailed a 2011 incident in which she says the mogul tried to give her a massage at his Connecticut home. Nyong'o says she refused. Instead, she gave the mogul a massage, then left when he said he wanted to take off his pants. It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, it's Music Makers Friday, fusing Afrobeat with traditional African sound. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Kenya, an Australian teacher, Gabrielle Maina, is shot dead during a robbery. In Morocco, the UN envoy for Western Sahara meets leaders of an Algerian-backed independence movement to get peace talks back on track. In Nigeria, suspected kidnapper changes his plea to not guilty and says the police coerced him to pleading guilty to the kidnapping of Dunu Donatus. In Liberia, George Weah and the current vice president of the country are officially declared the candidates for the runoff election on November 7th. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
And welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Baseball is now new to Nigeria. Is not new to Nigeria, but a local training academy wants to take the sport all the way to home base. The Baseball Tomorrow Academy, together with the U.S. Embassy in Abuja, held clinics run by former Major League Baseball stars. Up to 60 children between the ages of 12 and 15 from the 5 different states took part in the training. Baseball is still developing in most parts of Africa. One of the most famous players from the continent is South African-born Gift Ngwepe, the first African to appear in a Major League Baseball game. Next up, at 3 Royal Dutch Shell locations in Britain, electric vehicle drivers are being given the option to boost their energy. Locations in London, Surrey and Derby now boast electric vehicle charging points like this. Charging stations like this may prove particularly helpful for London's new hybrid black taxis made by the London Electric Vehicle Company, formerly the London Taxi Company. Earlier this year, Britain pledged to ban the sale of new cars and vans using diesel and gasoline starting in 2040 as part of a sweeping plan to tackle air pollution. And finally, a Chinese startup is hoping to Robodog can make four-legged robots as popular and affordable as smartphones and drones. Robodog Licargo was developed as a research platform, but is also an attempt to make robots helpful and more affordable. Named after the Laika, the Russian dog that became the first animal to orbit Earth, Licargo is about the size of a dog. It weighs 22 kilograms and costs between $20,000 and $30,000. And that's what's trending today. And it's Music Makers Friday, and today we'll introduce you to the sizzling sounds of Sierra Leonean group LXG Galadu. But first, joining me here in the studio is David Bandy, host and producer of VOA's African Beat. David, you're always welcome to Africa 54, and welcome again. Now, this music is from your home country.
Yes.
Tell me all about it.
Well,
this group is coming to DC as well.
The group is coming to DC. In fact, one of them, the lady called Pretty, she's already here, and the two other male members of the group are going to be here this week, because starting next week there's going to be a Sierra Leonean music festival that is going to start, and they're going to be part of this group. The LXG is one of the biggest groups in Sierra Leone when it comes to music. Originally, they started with all gentlemen. That's why they call LXG, League of Extraordinary Guys.
I was thinking it's large extra and all that stuff.
But now they have a lady in it. And they actually started singing in the church. You know, they were a church group, friends coming together. And like all the big stars, most of them, as soon as they start making names and they go into the outside world and they become very famous.
It's interesting because most groups don't stick together. Usually they split and then people go on individual way of doing music. But when you told me about this group coming, I checked them out and I saw one of the songs called Fele Fele, something to do with money.
Fele Fele, yes. In fact, that is what we are going to, that's what we're going to look at.
Great. So maybe let's take a listen to this music and then we can talk a little more
Fele
about
Fele,
it.
okay.
Number one, money, 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 money goes to wall. Money they make mother man the ball. Money they make mama it's papa. Make them for killing your picking child. Money make the world go evil. Money make the world go round. Me and I go pay for them all. Me and I go pay for this money. Me and I go kill for this money. God make money, I make a tiger take it for the life I give me chai. Fefele, fefele, money no nothing. Fefele, fefele, I give make a difference now. Fefele, fefele, money no nothing. Fefele, money you say you take. What no get no money, money.
Very interesting, David. Fele Fele. Now, all I see is the Sierra Leonean currency. I see dollars. What is the message?
Well, the message there is money is a big influence in our lives. But money can also bring confusion. Money can bring quarrels between families, friends, and everything. So you have to be careful. Don't allow the money to get into your head and you destroy your relationship. Even at home, parents quarrel because of money. And in a home where there is no money, there's always, maybe there's a tendency for even divorce.
Money is good and bad, eh?
It's good and bad. That's the message they try to give out there.
And the group, what do they plan to do next? I know they're coming to DC because you say that this Sierra Leone.
When they come, in fact, they're going to come to the Voice of America. They're going to do a live interview here and a live performance here at the Voice of America, and they're going to be on tour with some other members of the Sierra Leone music industry that are coming here for this big festival.
They plan on sticking together.
Oh, they're together because actually one of them actually broke away a long time ago and he went solo, but the actual group, they had the lady come in, so they're still together and they've promised that they're going to stick together.
The group is intact. When they come to VOA, we want to see them.
Definitely, they're going to be here.
David, thank you so much as always. Well, that's David Bande, host of Afrobeat at the Voice of America. And to learn more about David Bande's music and his VOA radio show, visit Facebook and type in the keywords African Beat on the Voice of America. And you can see what time his program can be heard in your area and get more information about some of his featured artists. And we leave you now with this LXG Galadu song, Pepele. Have a great weekend.
Number one, money, money, money. I got down. Money, money goes to wall. Money they make mother man the ball. Money they make mama it's papa. Make them for killing your picking child. Money make the world go evil. Money make the world go round. Me and I go pay for them all. Me and I go pay for this money. Me and I go kill for this money. God make money, I make a tiger take it for the life I give me chai. Fefele, fefele, money no nothing. Fefele, fefele, I can make a difference now. Fefele, fefele, money no nothing. Fefele, money you say you what no get no hey money hey money hey money hey money snake no get party money step no get party money keep put you up then put you down.
Welcome to English in a Minute. We all need air to breathe.
Hey, Jonathan, guess who's coming to dinner tonight?
Who?
Franco.
Not him.
What? He's fun, and he really knows how to keep the conversation going.
He's loud and talks only about himself.